Hello, everyone. Charles Watts here. Welcome back to Inside Arsenal. It is Wednesday. We're halfway through the week. I hope you're doing well wherever you're watching or listening to this around the world. The internationals are pretty much over. I think they're totally over. But certainly Arsenal involvement, I think, is done and dusted now. Players all heading back, able to go on holiday. England going out with an absolute whimper yesterday. Congratulations to Senegal with that 3-1 win at the City Ground. But yeah, England, wow, that was bad. Really, really bad. But we will talk about that a little bit later on in the show. We'll do a bit of an international roundup. A couple of Arsenal players on target for their countries. Last night, we're going to talk about Leroy Sane. Forgot his name for a minute there. Leroy Sane, who appears to have made a decision about where he is going. Looks like that deal is going to be wrapped up very, very swiftly. We're going to talk about Benjamin Sesko, Viktor Gyokeres, because let's face it, we've got to talk about those two because it's an Arsenal show. And it feels like we've been speaking about them for the last 6 months. So why break the habit of a lifetime? We're going to talk about Thomas Partey. He's been speaking a little bit about his future as well. Got questions and comments, loads and loads of stuff to get stuck into. If you haven't watched Inside Arsenal Extra Time yesterday, myself and James recorded that. That went out last evening, so you can either watch it here on YouTube or you can listen to it, on all your regular podcast platforms. All the links are down below in the description, including link to become an Inside Arsenal Patreon member. And if you do that, you get access to all of these shows ad-free, as well as exclusive extra content, access to the Discord, which we're all chatting on at the moment, giveaways, all those sort of things. So if you haven't become an Inside Arsenal Patreon member yet, then you can do so just down below there in the comments. In the description, I should say. Right, let's talk about Leroy Sane, shall we? A player who has been heavily linked with Arsenal over the last probably month or so as contract talks with Bayern fail to reach a conclusion. I was going to say struggle to reach a conclusion, but according to reports out of Germany this morning, they have absolutely failed to reach a conclusion. I will hold my hands up on this one. I got it wrong. I was convinced he would end up re-signing for Bayern, as so many Bayern players tend to do when their contracts get to this sort of length and we start hearing stories about other clubs being interested. It normally ends up with them signing a new improved contract with Bayern Munich. This time, it hasn't happened, so I'll hold my hands up. But he's not coming to Arsenal. He's going to Galatasaray by the sounds of it. It is all pretty much already done and dusted. And it looks like that deal is going to be completed on a free transfer very, very soon. Now, DJ's got in touch on the Inside Arsenal Discord channel, which again you get access to if you're a member. And he says, "Hi Charles, with Sane rumoured to be off to Galatasaray, do you think that's a bullet dodged? Yes, he'd have been in good depth, but at nearly 30 on what would be massive wages, I could always see that being the winger signing this summer if we couldn't get Rodrigo. The caveat would have been, well, we got Sane. I personally am very glad and think Gala is a good move for him at this stage of his career. Would love to know your thoughts." I agree wholeheartedly with you, DJ. I said it at the time. This was not a move that interested me at all. In fact, I would have been concerned had Arsenal ended up getting Leroy Sane. Look, I think he's a good player. He's been a fantastic player. There's no doubt about that. And he could go on to have a really good end of his career. You know, he could sort of buck the trend of what we've seen of sort of aging wingers at times who do struggle and lose their pace, especially aging wingers who've been in a game for a long, long time, have always relied on their pace. And I think we've all been scarred a little bit by that when you look at Willian, Sterling, for example. And I couldn't shake the feeling in my mind that Sane was going to be or could have been another highly paid aging winger that proves to be a mistake. Obviously, we'll never know. It's all hypothetical now, but that was what was in my mind. And if I said at the time, if he ended up being the only winger signing, I think that would have been a really poor decision from Arsenal. So, I'm not at all bothered to see Leroy Sane go to Galatasaray. DJ, I agree with you. I think Gala is a good move for him. I think he'll go to Turkey. If he can keep himself fit, I'm sure he'll do very, very well over there. It's a massive club, you know, packed out stadiums, absolutely hostile. You know, it's going to be a fantastic place to play football in the sort of latter stages of your career. And so I think it's going to be a fantastic move for Leroy Sane. But I'm very, very happy that he's not come to Arsenal. I just don't. If that was going to end up being the plan, then I would be very, very worried about the plan, because you really shouldn't be factoring in a 30-year-old winger as in your sort of transfer plan that you've been saying you've been ready to execute for a long, long time. So, I'm absolutely fine with this move happening and him not coming to Arsenal. Right, Benjamin Sesko. Let's talk about him quickly. Obviously, the transfer window closed for 6 days. Now it has closed. The first transfer window of the summer has closed, and we had a lot of talk yesterday about the Saudi interest in Benjamin Sesko, which was legit. There was Saudi interest in Benjamin Sesko, but obviously the window is closed, so he's not going to Saudi now anyway for the Club World Cup. For I think it was Al Hilal, wasn't it? Who were interested possibly in taking him because they couldn't get the likes of Viktor Osimhen done. And that's not to say they won't come back into him in the second half of the transfer window this summer, but you would expect it's not going to be the case. Anyway, the Slovenia manager was talking yesterday. Benjamin Sesko's not been part of this these international fixtures because he's been carrying a little bit of a knee injury, and Leipzig have asked for him not to be involved, basically because they know there's a transfer probably going to happen. They wanted to protect him, make sure that he didn't aggravate an injury or anything like that. So he wasn't involved, but the Slovenia manager was asked after their 2-1 win yesterday, I think it was against Bosnia, about Sesko in Saudi Arabia. And Mataz Kek said, Sesko in Saudi Arabia, I would advise him to never go there, at least not at his age. It's not that I underestimate the Saudi league. On the contrary, I work there with Al Etihad and the club is still a part of me. I also watch the league regularly, but the time will come for Sesko for that. I'm convinced that Benjamin himself and the people who care will be smart enough to find a solution. I think we all want them to be smart enough to find a solution. Arsenal, Leipzig, whatever. I always try and be patient when it comes to the transfer window, but the longer this one sort of drags on, the more it's harder to sort of keep your patience. And I'm talking as a sort of fan here more than anything else, because you just want this deal to be done. You're kind of like, okay, if he is the guy, and we've had an awful lot of time, or you've had an awful lot of time to decide whether he is the guy or not, you kind of just want to go out there and get this one done, because the longer you leave it, the more you open yourselves up to these sort of suggestions that Saudi Arabian clubs are in for him, or we'll see someone else suddenly enter the market for him, and then suddenly the price will go up even more because there's a bidding war and all that sort of stuff. So if he is the guy, which we think he is, then just go out and get the deal done. I mean, it's not that difficult. Or I say that, I'm not involved in it, but it shouldn't be that difficult. If you've got the money, go out there, get it done, get him on board. Let's get him ready for pre-season in a few weeks' time. That would be the ideal scenario. We'll wait and see if anything progresses on that this week in Sesko. But certainly his national team coach is telling him, don't go to Saudi Arabia just yet. And I think those are very, very wise words for such a young player. Dale got in touch, sort of talking about on the back of the Saudi Arabia stuff. He says, hi, Charles, probably one for yesterday, but however, I'm interested to get your take. Do you think the tide is turning regarding players getting swayed by Saudi money? I thought Bruno and Osimhen were nailed on to go there. Not to mention Teo Hernandez, and they've all rejected huge offers. Hopefully football is returning to a bit of normality and players realise they are wasting a short career in a substandard league. Would love to get your thoughts. Yeah, this is something I've thought about a little bit in recent weeks. We are seeing more and more players sort of resisting the urge, I think, to go to Saudi. Certainly the sort of younger players anyway. There's still not been that sort of groundbreaking, I don't think, absolutely huge signing where you're just like, wow, he's gone there at this age. I think the one that probably has surprised me the most was, I don't know, John Duran when he went there. But we haven't seen like a Florian Wirtz or, that type of signing where we've all thought, oh, he's just going to move to a massive, massive European club. And then it just hasn't quite happened. I can't think of one off the top of my head. And so we haven't got to that stage on it yet. And it does feel like, although they're trying, Saudi, and they are trying for those sort of players, we're not quite seeing them being swayed yet. So, hopefully that remains the same. We'll wait and see, because the money on offer is so head turning that you never know. But it does seem like certainly still the younger players are still able to resist the edge. And they should as well, just because they're not going to be poor staying in Europe. They're still going to have plenty of money playing in Europe, and they're still going to have a lot more eyes watching them. Whether UEFA end up sort of bending to Saudi Arabia and end up letting them into the Champions League or something like that, that could be a tipping point. Hopefully that never happens. But we'll have to wait and see on that. Viktor Gyokeres, this is interesting. Really strong reports from Portugal today that he is threatening to go on strike and is furious. Him and his representatives are furious with Sporting for going back on a gentleman's agreement. Now, I always say that there's nothing worse in football than a gentleman's agreement. Does it ever really work out that way? Or whenever you hear stories of a player having a gentleman's agreement or an agent having a gentleman's agreement with a club to let their player go, it always ends in arguments and players getting annoyed and clubs going back on these agreements. It's just like, how stupid can you be? If you're going to get an agreement, get it in writing so it's legally binding, because this always seems to happen. And it's happening, according to reports in Portugal anyway, that Sporting are now not letting him go for the 60 million euros that they said they were going to let him go for. I think it was 60 million, and then another 10 million in bonuses or something like that. They're now saying, because they've got the release clause of 100 million, they weren't close to that, sort of 80 million they would potentially take. And now Gyokeres and his representatives are saying they're going back on the deal that they agreed with us, the gentleman's agreement. Gyokeres, apparently, according to reports out of Portugal today, is now threatening to go on strike and not go back for pre-season because he feels absolutely let down by Sporting and all that sort of stuff. It just sounds like it's turning into a real mess when it comes to him and his potential transfer this summer. Arsenal's still there or thereabouts for Gyokeres. Obviously, Sesko is the priority at the moment, but while that hasn't happened, and while Gyokeres is still at Sporting, there's always a chance Arsenal could pivot back to him. But yeah, sounding like it's getting very, very messy at Sporting. Honestly, gentleman's agreement. It's just such a terrible idea. I could just I have no training in this sort of thing. But I could tell an agent, if a club came up to you and said, "Oh, we'll give you a gentleman's agreement, your player could go." It's like, should definitely get that in writing, shouldn't you? Thomas Partey's been speaking about his future in the last 24 hours or so. I've got the quotes here in terms of what he had to say. He was kind of asked about what's going on. He was asked about whether he's worried about Martin Zubimendi potentially coming in and his future. And when he was asked about it, he said, "Look, I think the first thing is where you are happy and where you feel at home. Then it's about what is your next objective and what you want to achieve. You still have to look at all of this. And at the end of the day, we all have a family that needs money. This is on our mind. We are not getting younger. There are lots of things that you have to look at with your family, where you want them to be happy, when nobody's going to destroy your family. These are the things you have to look at. When you are young, you just look anywhere. I'm an Arsenal fan. I can't decide anything. Just have to leave it to my agent and to the club. I just want to enjoy football." So those are words of Thomas Partey when asked about his future and what's going on with these Arsenal contract talks, which I can't actually give you an update on at the moment because, as far as I'm aware anyway, nothing's really moved on from the last time I really sort of spoke about it. That it is still just a case of nothing's been agreed, talks are ongoing, but nothing's been agreed. And, when you look at Thomas Partey there in those comments, what he's talking about, family and they need money and all that sort of stuff. That's where these contract talks are always going to be proved to be difficult, because you've got Arsenal looking at a player that they would rather keep, and they have offered a contract to, but they're looking at his age, his injury record, and all that sort of thing. And a high earner, it's like, okay, we'll keep you. We want to keep you, but we're going to have to try and reduce your wages. Then on the players' side, you're looking at that thinking, well, this is my final big contract. You've got offers from elsewhere, big offers from elsewhere. You would imagine, not that I know the numbers involved on that. I don't want to reduce the terms of my contract that I've already got here and reduce the wages that I'm on. So it was always going to be sort of complicated discussions. At the moment, those discussions haven't reached any sort of successful conclusion. Again, as far as I'm aware, that might have changed, and I just don't know about it. But that's as far as I'm aware on it. And yeah, so we'll see what happens with Thomas Partey. You do feel like at some point fairly soon we're going to need to come to a sort of conclusion one way or the other, because Partey's going to want to know what he's doing, but Arsenal are also going to want to know what's happening here. Because if Thomas Partey goes in the same summer that Jorginho goes, you've got to go out there and sign another midfielder. You can't just have Zubimendi as the only midfielder. I think you definitely have to go and sign another one. So if they need time to go out and do that, then they need to do it. So I think one way or the other, we need a conclusion to this very, very soon, and I would suggest we will get one very, very soon. Okay, on to some international action now. As I said at the start of the show, England awful yesterday. Senegal brilliant though. I was so impressed with Senegal yesterday watching that game. The way they pressed, the hunger, the speed of which they moved the ball. They got forward in numbers. I just thought they were so much better than England on every single level. They thoroughly deserved their win yesterday. England were awful, as they tend to be around this time of year. Friendlies in the summer, this late in the summer. I remember the awful one against Hungary a couple of years ago when they lost 4-0 at Molineux around this time. And again, they were well beaten yesterday. Saka started, Rice started, Lewis Skelly started. No one played well in the whole England team. It was just a really poor performance. Lots of questions at the moment about what's the sort of impact Tuchel's made. Seeing no improvement in the football that we were kind of promised, and this fearless football we were going to see under him absolutely hasn't materialised. as of yet, and there was lots of boos yesterday on the full-time whistle, so already under pressure. There's not really been a honeymoon period when it comes to Thomas Tuchel, and when he's been brought in purely with the aim of trying to win the World Cup. Not that you can, I don't really understand how your aim can be, I have to win the World Cup in 12 months or 16 months, 18 months, whatever it was. It's like, it's not quite that easy. But we've seen absolutely low improvement, and at the moment, England are way off, way off. You watch you watch the Nations League final, Spain versus Portugal, and the quality on show there. Then you look at the quality we saw from England last night. Miles off it, absolutely miles off it. Pretty safe bet at this stage, just saying England will not be winning the World Cup next summer, but you never know. But anyway, all the Arsenal players came through that unscathed, didn't play well. Lewis Skelly got caught out for the second goal. Saka had one shot that was saved. Really good save, actually, by Mendy. Declan Rice was okay, nothing special at all. So, yeah, all three of them were sort of pretty underwhelming on the night. Elsewhere, we had goal for Zinchenko. He scored the winner for Ukraine against Canada, I think it was, last night. Nice little finish, actually, as well from Zinchenko. Left-footed, drilled it into the corner. Jakub Kiwior was on target as well. Gabriel Martinelli played the full 90 minutes for Brazil as they sealed qualification for the World Cup with a 1-0 win against, I think it was Paraguay off the top of my head. So, yeah, everyone seems to be injury-free as well from the internationals, which is obviously a good thing. Poland losing, but Kiwior scoring in their game, lost 2-1 Poland. So, yeah, time to go off on holiday now for the boys, which I think we can all say they very much need, and they can put their feet up. And I was going to say watch the Club World Cup, but I highly doubt they will because I just don't know why anyone wants to watch that competition. Honestly, the players yesterday looked so knackered, so exhausted in that England game. The England players did anyway. Some of them played 60 odd games this season. They're having to play international friendlies in June, and then some of them then are immediately going to have to go on and get on a plane, fly to America, play in this made-up World Cup tournament for a month, come back, go straight into the Premier League season, and then have the World Cup at the end of it. It's absolute madness. I have very little sympathy for footballers because, yes, they earn all that money and it's an amazing job and all that sort of stuff, but you still have to protect the product, protect the players. And this is going to make the product worse because players are going to be absolutely running on fumes. You're going to lose some of the best players because their bodies are going to break down because there's just too much football. It's just such an issue that is going to come to a head at some point. I'm absolutely convinced. We've already heard players talking about strikes and all that sort of stuff. And I'm absolutely convinced it's going to come to a head very, very soon because it just can't continue. Just absolutely crazy schedule at the moment. Right, some interesting stuff from Ethan Nwaneri, who's been speaking at about his sort of his time at Arsenal and all that sort of stuff, and he was talking about Arteta, and he was talking about how Arteta has changed everything, even the way he sits when he comes into the room. It's like he's very focused on body language and stuff like that to kind of make yourself feel big and all that sort of stuff. He doesn't want to see players slouching when they're eating their food. He was also talking about how sort of tough it was, not tough, but at the end of the season when he kind of lost his place in the team and all that sort of stuff, and he was quite fine about it. I'm trying to find the quotes now because I did have them up, but I've managed to get rid of them without. Here we are, and yeah, I just thought I thought he was very good because Arsenal have protected Ethan quite a lot when it comes to media interviews, and this was one when he was on England international duty with the under-21s, and he was kind of standing in a big sort of press huddle and answering questions from everywhere. So it wasn't a sit-down interview, and these can be pretty intense because you've got microphones all over you. And I thought he handled it pretty well from watching it. And in terms of what happened at the end of the season, he said going from playing quite a lot to not as much is normal in football. So I don't really take it to heart. I understand Mikel's got a decision to make at the end of the day, and it's hard for him to make. He obviously wants to include you and include everyone, but he can't. I think it's part of football, and it's those times that can really define where you're going to be. I think I've dealt with it well. I'm in a good place mentally and physically. On his favourite position, he said, you can see sometimes I'm a natural midfielder, but I think if the manager wants to play you in a position, you have to do it to the best of your abilities. I don't mind playing on the right because anywhere in the Arsenal first team, I'll be happy playing and trying to do a good job for the team. I've played false nine before a few times. I think I can do a role anywhere that the manager needs me. I think it's pretty clear that we will see, I think this coming season anyway, that we're going to see Nwaneri sort of moving more into that central role that I think we all know ultimately is going to be his best position. I thought he did well out on the right when he replaced Bukayo Saka at times last season while he was injured, that he more than held his own out there. But I do think those sort of central areas, the Odegaard position is where we're going to see Nwaneri an awful lot more from next season. But I thought his interview he did was really, really impressive, and it's good to see him sort of speaking in front of the media a little bit more now. Right, going to move on to some questions before we wrap this one up for today. Max says, James mentioned it quickly, but I think it's a massive point. We have Saka, Martinelli, Trossard and Nwaneri, so we can wait until late summer for Rodrigo. He's worth waiting for. We're good enough without him to get us through August and September, so we can sign him late, let him get a proper vacation and get him fully up to speed. I think his Real Madrid situation will get sorted soon after the Club World Cup, which ends mid-July. He'll see there how much time he gets to play in his preferred role. If Rodrigo stays at Arsenal, we'll still have a few weeks to bring someone of quality in before the summer window closes. But if Rodrigo goes, you have to think Arsenal and maybe Bayern would be his top destination. Who else has the money for a transfer fee, wages? He walks into his desired starting left wing role and is a Champions League contender. Having 3 other Brazilians already on the team could be an attractive proposition to him. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. I've kind of had my reservations about having a long running Rodrigo saga this summer, as much as I would like to see him signed. But you make a good point. Arsenal are hardly short on the left-sided attacking role. You know, Martinelli starting for Brazil yesterday in the absence of Rodrigo, played the full 90 minutes in their game. Like you said, Trossard as well has done the role very well at times. So it's not like they're short. It's not absolutely essential they bring someone in. I just kind of look at it and think it'd be ideal if you bring someone in early in your kid set. But, if you're going to wait for a player, then Rodrigo's certainly one of those players that you could wait for. I saw lots of reaction to his Instagram post yesterday of him training in a Real Madrid shirt, just with the word happy. Lots of people saying that taking that as he's happy to stay and all that sort of stuff. I'm not sure it's quite that deep, but it's been interesting watching the reaction to that. Lewis here says, probably the strongest I've ever disagreed with you, Charles, with this Kepa deal. I don't care when it was. He literally refused to be substituted. That shows a serious lack of professionalism and a massive ego. I don't want bad apples in the squad. End of the day, I back Arteta and the club's decision, but I'm just shocked to see you toe the line on this one. It's an interesting one that you're so bothered. I mean, I've seen quite a few people actually. So it's certainly not just Lewis who's got a problem with that. I just kind of feel like everyone makes mistakes. And that was a mistake from Kepa, no doubt about it. But it just was a long, long time ago. And we've just seen nothing to suggest that's a regular sort of occurrence. It was not a good thing for a professional to do. Obviously, you've got to do what your manager says. And he wouldn't certainly never be able to get away with something like that under Mikel Arteta. Absolutely no doubt about it. He'd never play again if he did something like that under Arteta. But I just think you've got to give people second chances at times. Look at Granit Xhaka. Look what happened to him at Arsenal with the fans and all that sort of stuff. He came back and learned from that mistake, sort of held his hands up in a kind of Granit Xhaka way and was fantastic. And I kind of look at Kepa and think, it was a bad thing that he did, but he learned from it. It's not really been a regular occurrence since then. That's why I'm just not overly concerned by it. I'd be much more concerned if it was that sort of thing we saw from him time and time again over his career, and sort of disciplinary issues and character issues, all that sort of stuff. But I don't really get the sense that we have. So that's why it's just not really at the forefront of my mind when it comes to this deal. But cheers for the comment, Lewis. Appreciate you getting in touch on that one. Flappy Flap Flap says it's mind-boggling how wild football transfers have gotten. It's less about sport, more about self-perpetuating industry of whispers and fiction. Give me the good old days anytime. And yes, this will definitely date me, but I can vividly recall turning on the TV in 95, hitting CFAX and discovering we signed Bergkamp. No leaks, no end of speculation, just pure out of the blue joy. Now that was a good day. That was a good day. Flappy Flap Flap. What a name. And I actually found that out through CFAX. Well, say that. I didn't find it out through CFAX. I was playing football in my back garden with my brother, and my dad found out on CFAX. And I remember this so vividly in the back garden, Dad pulling open the back door of the house and shouting out to me, "We've got him." I remember it so well because obviously we knew that talks were going on. He was been on the back of the papers and all that sort of stuff. But I just remember my dad opening the door and saying, "We've got him." And he'd seen that on CFAX. And I remember seeing us sign Oleg Luzny on CFAX out of the blue. Lauren as well was another one. Page 312, transfer rumours, all that sort of stuff. Good old days. I agree. Look, I know I sort of am involved in this wild football transfer stuff, and I talk about it all the time. So I'm probably partly to blame for you not enjoying it that much, Flappy Flap Flap. But I agree that the good old days of CFAX were golden. Let's put it that way. And just finally, one from, I don't know how to pronounce that, I'm afraid. Strawscab says, I heard that RB Leipzig now want 80 million for Sesko. How much is too much? I suppose this is the question just to throw out to you guys, really, in the comments below. How much is too much for Benjamin Sesko? £80 million? Is that too much? Is that doable? Is that a price you think just go out and get him? I would say that's sort of bordering what I'd pay. But, if you don't get Sesko, who do you get? So I would say 80 million tops with add-ons, that sort of stuff. Maybe making it up to 80 million is probably, give or take, in modern football what you pay for a top striker of his potential and his age. But let me know your thoughts on that in the comments below. How much is too much for Benjamin Sesko? And that's it from me today, everyone. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Appreciate it always. I'll be back tomorrow to do it all over again. We've also got the Arsenal Press Pass coming, which is exclusive for Arsenal Patreon members tomorrow as well. And if you want to be involved in that, you want to be able to watch it, then get down, become a member. You can find the link down there in the description below. Until then, have a good one, everyone. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.